Everyone, tonight we're tracking a fast-moving story at the intersection of diplomacy, defense planning, and Arctic strategy. Here's why this matters right now. In the span of just a few days, President Donald Trump has publicly pointed to a framework for a future arrangement involving Greenland and then put a clear time marker on when he says the public should expect more details. According to multiple reports, Trump told reporters he expects something within about 2 weeks. That timeline is drawing attention not only because of what it suggests about negotiations, but because Greenland is not just a map location. It is tied to questions of sovereignty, alliance coordination, and Arctic security. And those are issues that can't be settled with a single announcement. So, in the next few minutes, we're going to do 3 things. First, lay out exactly what has been said publicly and what remains unclear. Second, zoom out to explain why Greenland holds outsized strategic importance. And third, look at what the proposed deadline could mean for U.S. relations with Denmark and for broader coordination within NATO based only on what's been reported and confirmed. According to reports, President Trump said he would provide more clarity within about 2 weeks when asked about details and whether Denmark was on board with a potential agreement connected to Greenland. This comes after earlier public comments around a framework for a future deal. Reuters reported that Trump said the United States and NATO had formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland, linking the issue to security and access concerns in the Arctic region. Now, slow down here framework can mean many things in diplomatic terms. It can be a broad set of principles, it can be an outline for talks, or it can be a political statement meant to signal direction without finalizing details. What it is not, at least based on what is publicly available, is a complete treaty text with ratified terms. And that distinction matters because a lot of the public reaction depends on what people assume that word implies. Greenland is a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Its leadership has repeatedly stated in recent years that the island is not for sale, and Danish officials have emphasized sovereignty and the right of Greenland's people to self-determination. In the latest round of reporting, Reuters noted Denmark's message that any outcome must respect the integrity and sovereignty of the Kingdom of Denmark and Greenlandic self-determination. So if you're asking, what is the deal actually about? The publicly described focus, according to Reuters, includes security in the Arctic and related strategic considerations. Reuters also reported that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said sovereignty was not discussed in his talks with Trump, and that Trump's focus was on protecting the Arctic region as China and Russia become more active there. That's an important point. The alliance framing security posture deterrence doesn't automatically answer the sovereignty question. They're separate issues, and in diplomacy they can move at very different speeds. Now let's zoom out and talk about the underlying reason Greenland consistently shows up in major defense and foreign policy discussions. Greenland's location places it near Arctic routes and air and maritime corridors that have become more relevant as geopolitical competition increases. Politico described Greenland as hosting Pituffik Space Base, a U.S. military installation linked to missile warning and space surveillance, and said the administration and advisors have described Greenland as important for security in the face of activity from Russia and China. This is the kind of geography that changes how countries think about early warning, air defense, and strategic access. It's not just about what's on the ground. It's also about what's in the air, in space, and in surrounding waters. At the same time, Greenland is home to communities and governance structures, and it has its own political priorities. That's why the reporting frequently emphasizes not just strategic value, but also autonomy and the principle of self-determination. So any U.S. push that appears to blur those lines, strategy on one side, sovereignty on the other, will trigger scrutiny. According to HuffPost reporting, Trump said details would be shared in about 2 weeks, describing the proposal as being in negotiation. That statement is significant, but it's also limited. A 2-week timeline could mean any of the following. Without assuming facts not in evidence, it could mean an administration wants to publish a public outline. It could mean negotiators want time to align messaging with partners. Or it could simply be a time estimate for when more information might be ready. What it does not automatically mean is that an agreement has been finalized, signed, or accepted by all sides. And that brings us to the next key element: reactions and constraints. Reuters reported Denmark's preference for handling the issue through private diplomacy rather than social media. That line matters because it reflects a common friction in modern diplomacy. Public negotiation versus private negotiation. Public statements can accelerate momentum, but they can also harden positions, increase political pressure, and complicate quiet compromise. When you attach a time horizon like 2 weeks, you raise expectations. And once expectations are raised, officials may face questions at home about what exactly has been agreed and what hasn't. Politico also reported on skepticism in Washington and political pushback around the idea of seizing territory and how the issue plays with alliances. But the most important point for viewers is this. Whatever the U.S. proposes, Denmark and Greenland have their own institutions, politics, and public opinion. And NATO, as an alliance, operates on consensus, especially on politically sensitive issues. So the 2-week marker may be a U.S. communications goal, but it does not erase those larger realities. Reuters reported that after meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, Trump suggested Western Arctic allies could forge a new deal that addresses missile defense interests and blocks Russia and China from gaining a foothold economically or militarily in Greenland. This is where the story shifts from political headlines to defense architecture. In the Arctic, infrastructure decisions, ports, runways, surveillance systems, communications tend to have long timelines and high costs. They also raise questions like, who funds what? Who operates what? Under which legal authority? And how does it connect to existing treaties and agreements? And even if allies agree on the overall goal, deterrence and security, they may still differ on the method. What kind of footprint? What kind of investment? And how to keep it aligned with local governance and consent. This is also why framework language can be attractive politically. It signals direction without requiring every detail to be resolved on day one. Another reason this story is gaining momentum is that it touches multiple domains at once. Reuters reported that markets responded to shifts in Trump's posture around tariffs in Greenland, showing that investors were paying attention to the risk of escalating disputes with allies. Even without overreading that market movement, the basic point stands. When a territorial or alliance-related issue becomes headline news, it can influence perceptions of stability, especially if tariffs, defense commitments, or cross-border relationships are involved. And in practical terms, businesses and governments watch these signals closely because they can affect planning, procurement, and long-term investments, particularly in infrastructure and energy. Is it about military access, infrastructure upgrades, investment rules, joint Arctic coordination? The reporting indicates security and broader Arctic concerns are central, but the full detail has not been publicly laid out. We have public statements emphasizing sovereignty and self-determination, and we have reporting indicating negotiations would continue. Rutte's reported comments suggest the sovereignty question was not part of those talks, with a focus instead on Arctic security. Because when timelines are announced, the next phase becomes as much about expectations management as it is about negotiation. Let's be careful here and keep this grounded. If the outcome is primarily about updated military access arrangements or deeper security coordination, something that has precedence in allied relationships, it could mean changes in basing agreements, investment in facilities, or expanded joint operations. If the outcome goes beyond that into questions of political control or sovereignty, that would likely bring far more serious diplomatic and legal challenges because Denmark and Greenland's leaders have emphasized self-determination and sovereignty concerns in the past. An alliance cohesion would come under strain. But right now, the verified public picture is incomplete. The safest way to describe the impact is, the story is developing, and the deadline appears to be a marker for when the Trump administration expects to provide more detail or direction publicly, rather than proof that all sides have finalized a deal. So here's the responsible bottom line tonight. President Trump has pointed to a roughly 2-week timeline for more clarity on a potential Greenland-related deal, according to reports. Reuters has reported on a stated framework and on conversations that emphasize Arctic security concerns, while Denmark's leadership has stressed sovereignty and Greenlandic self-determination. And that sets up an institutional test not just of negotiation, but of how major powers manage alliance relationships, sovereignty sensitivities, and security planning in a region that is rapidly gaining strategic attention. When the 2-week marker arrives, the key question may not be whether a headline is announced. It may be whether the details, if they are released, show clear consent, clear scope, and clear alignment with existing diplomatic norms. We'll stay with this story as official statements and verified documents emerge.